Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 997 for the 24th of February, 2025. Ooh, we're getting excited for show 1000. Going to be coming up soon on the 17th of March. That is show number 1000. And we're going to be all together in person, in the same room, at the same time, at the same place. I know that James Adelot cannot make it. Neil is a little questionable, but everybody else will be there. We're going to be live in Huntsville, Alabama on the 17th of March for episode number 1000. Thanks to our friends at Barron Weather. Bob Bear and his crew, thank you for being a sponsor and making this thing happen. And we're going to look back at 1000 episodes of Weather Brains. By the way, if you're new here, this is the pre-show. This is the magical, marvelous, magical time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we occasionally will say some very outrageous things. But yeah, we're talking about show 1000, Bill. Uh-oh, Bill's wearing a lanyard. He's wearing a lanyard. That means he's at some official function.
Yeah, tonight, James, I'm in my official capacity as the chairman of the Greater Birmingham Convention and Visitors Bureau out here at Rossbridge. So Rick Smith has set me up. The other Rick Smith, not our Rick Smith, the general manager of the resort here, has set me up in a beautiful meeting room. We have
Wow,
our customer advisory board here from all over the country. And I just left after the third course of dinner, James, which was beet soup with creme fraiche on it. I think I thought this had your name written all over it.
Beet soup.
Yeah, it was really good.
I'm from Butler County. We don't serve a lot of we serve beef stew, but not beet soup. There's a big difference there.
They're gonna bring me some. They're gonna bring me some beef short rib here in a minute. But I'm missing the lemon sorbet. You know, there's something there to cleanse your palate after the beef soup. So it's very fancy, James. Very fancy.
No, I've been there. I have every year we have the ALAHA leadership meeting there. The Alabama Hospital Association meets there. So, and every year I go to the Ross Bridge Resort in December and read a few Christmas books with the residents and children of Ross Bridge. It's a wild evening every year, and we raise money for local ministries. But so I've been there. I get out from
Have
time
you
to
been here for the
time.
bagpipes, James? When they do the bagpipes at sunset?
No, I have not.
I think they do that every
I'm always
night. You know, it's kind of a Scottish theme here. You know, it's a pretty spectacular resort.
No, it really is. It's the castle in the valley. It's very impressive. So there you go. But we're talking about show 1000, March 17th. Get excited about that. I feel good about this
We have a
show. I
great
think it's going to work.
plan for it now. I'm so excited. I, I was worried about it for weeks and months and years, and now I think we have a fabulous plan. We think our friends at Barron, they've really outdone themselves getting all of our panelists there and putting them up for the night, and it's going to be really special. And we have some outstanding surprises that even you are not going to know about, James Bean. We're going to surprise you.
Ooh, okay.
Yes, that's my internet connection is unstable. That's not good.
No, it's kind of choppy. I don't know if you got a little. You can turn the
I should
wick
have
up a
bought
little
the
bit.
expensive internet. Let me go see if
Yeah,
I can switch to this code that Rick gave me. I'll try to do
a
that.
very
I'll be back.
very nice resort hotel, but you need to pay for the upgraded Wi-Fi. Um, but no, I feel good about Show 1000. We I was a little worried about the technical side of things because to make this work, it takes a little technical voodoo here. But we have roped in a technical person that will be bringing up some audio gear and real microphones and real equipment to make the audio sound really good. And I think I've got the video figured out, so I think we're going to be good for this Huntsville gig. Um, so again, that's going to be on March the 17th, and as I understand it from Bill, this will not be open to the. We've had some people ask, can we come watch? And in this case, I do not believe it is open to the public. It's like in a closed environment which might be best because if a brawl breaks out, you don't want to be in there when a fist fight breaks out with all of us in the same room. So, um,
No beer bottles.
but
No beer bottles. Won't be any of that.
let's put chicken wire up in front of the set there. But
Loser leave
no,
town.
I want to say the last time we did a live show where everybody was, not everybody, but most everybody was in the same room was that barbecue joint in Leeds called Huck's Barbecue.
A brawl could have
We
broken
actually had
out
a
there.
couple of people that stopped in off Interstate 20 that were WeatherBrains fans, which is kind of
Yeah,
cool.
one from Dallas, I think. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, that, and of course we have done them from NWA and AMS
AMS, yeah.
before, but this will
And the
be in a
National Weather
whole.
Center, don't forget that one, James Fan.
Oh yeah, oh boy, I watched the Chuck Doswell memorial service, and I could just I could just hear his voice and my voice in that room berating that poor young woman in that same place.
And I could hear me and John Scala climbing under the table.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I'm glad everybody gathered together, and I thought that was a very nice, appropriate service for Chuck. I had to speak at a function Saturday afternoon, and right when I finished with that, they started that, and I got a chance to. I didn't get a chance to see it, but I listened to it, and I really enjoyed that. So that was good. So we're gonna. I know that
I'm
Roger
worried that we
got
don't have
the.
Roger. What's the deal?
Yeah, he got the invitation because he responded back after I sent it to him. But normally he would be here by now. So the theme of the show tonight, Roger Edwards Unhinged, or what do we call it? Not. And let's welcome our television viewers at the top of the hour. We have no weather issues here. It's Monday night, the 24th. This is Weather Brains, weekly show for weather geeks, dweebs, nerds, dorks, and weenies. So I see James A., who is on the line. Here comes Rick Smith, and here comes Roger. All right, everybody's online. This will get us all hooked up. Hopefully, Kim and Neil, and I think Jen is out this week.
Yes.
But hopefully Neil can join us. And we're getting Roger and Rick all hooked up on the audio here. So let's go ahead and roll this thing. Actually, let me get a mic check from Roger first. Roger, if you can hear us, give us a quick mic check to be sure we're good. Because you're going to be doing a lot of talking here. Your audio channel is critical. Bill, did you get your upgraded Wi-Fi there? You online now?
Yeah, I have the special code, and do I sound better?
Yes.
I'm not doing the Brian Peters steal the internet thing, which I was doing before.
Yeah, drive by in the parking lot and steal hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah, they were on to me. They cut me off, so I got the code now.
Hey, Roger, your video is. How can I describe this? It's.
Looks okay to me.
Well, I could try to turn it right side up or upside down.
We can all just turn ours that way too.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. It's sideways. So that must mean I'm the wrong way. Can you hear me?
Yes,
sir.
Your audio is
hear you.
perfect. Your
right.
video is.
I just
All
need
the, the blood is rushing
90
to your
degrees out of
left
phase.
ear.
All right, there we go.
There you go.
There we go. Bingo. We have a winner.
Okay,
right.
well, that worked for you.
Nice cable there. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. All right.
Yeah, this cable.
I got worried that you were in a different time zone, Roger. Maybe you meant 7 Mountain or something.
Retiree.
All right, here we go.
Time.
Here we go. Show is underway. Here we go. And let me see. Track 1, track 2, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Maybe we are a big deal. Episode
Yeah.
number 997. Wow, we are just a couple of weeks away from show 1000 live. All of us together in the same place, same room, same time. Wow. We're going to do that on March the 17th of this year. That's going to be episode number 1000. We are 19 years old and 997 episodes in, and we're still kicking here. Oldest weather podcast in the universe. And I'm thankful the weather has calmed down a little bit, at least this week. Let's go to our Oklahoma correspondents. Let's start with Dr. James Adelot, who was in his upscale office at the TV station. James, how warm did you get today?
75. Very Troy Kimmel-like weather.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. So, Troy, how did you do?
I'm not sure exactly. I saw that one come and go by, but since you asked, the official high temperature out at Austin Bergstrom International Airport was 76 today, and at Camp Mabry, our in-city site, officially it was 77 degrees. So there you go.
Spring is about to spring out here. Spring is springing. Rick Smith, how'd you do in Norman today?
Norman Mesonet site recorded a high of 76. It felt wonderful.
Oh, boy. And for those that are listening and not watching, Troy and Rick and James Adelot, they're in their tank tops and flip-flops to celebrate the warmth, which for some of you guys is not the best look. So let's see. Yeah, it's a bad look for me. Kim, you're enjoying the spring-like weather. Welcome.
Thank you. I enjoyed it so much. I took the kids straight to a park after school today. It was so beautiful. I mean, even still, the sun's been down a little while. It was in the 60s, and it really, really is about time. I think we can all agree we're ready for this.
We all are ready. I walked out. We have a little break in the evening news block at 5:30. I walked outside and just sat for 5 minutes. No phone, no nothing. I just sat out there and breathed and just was enjoying a lovely day. But Bill Murray, I'm excited. This is going to be a good show tonight. I'm pumped. So let's bring in our special guest. Uh-oh.
I think Bill actually went down the hall and around the corner. Let's put it that way.
Oh, wow.
He
abandoned ship.
This might be a
We
record.
all hope Bill's okay.
I see what I did not know the chat room.
Yeah.
Bill said he had to go to the restroom and take care of business. So that was a quick one. Wow. I should read the chat room more often here. Sorry, Bill. Let's bring in our guest. Let's get this thing going.
You didn't get through all those introductions that fast. Now, come on, James. You usually stretch this out for about 10, 12 minutes, and that was pretty quick. So, all right. Well, anyway, tonight's guest weather brain is a retired lead forecaster from the Storm Prediction Center with nearly 40 years of federal service, specializing in severe convective storms and tornado forecasting. A passionate storm chaser, researcher, and an advocate for weather safety. He co-founded the Electronic Journal of Severe Storms Meteorology and remains an influential voice in meteorology. Roger Edwards, it is great to see you, and even more fabulous to have you on WeatherBrains tonight.
Bill, James, Kim. It's great to be. Am I sideways again?
No, you're upside down. You've got 180 degrees out of phase.
You're hanging from the ceiling.
The show title already is Roger Edwards Upside Down. That's our first show title.
Not a bad title.
This will be on the 1,000th show. Yeah.
He retires and turns into a bat.
The blood is rushing to your head, Roger.
Now you're good. Now you're good.
Now
You're right
gravity
side
has
up.
taken back over. This is good. Good. Now is your audio okay?
And now you're muted.
Oh yeah. Now probably the camera has gotten out of whack here.
Okay.
Now we have a frightening wedge tornado.
Now we're being terrified by a tornado here.
All right. Am I audible?
Audible and
Loud and
visible.
clear.
Outstanding. Finally, at least the technical difficulties are not as much as they often are.
True.
Yeah, it's not like Google Hangouts, Roger, probably like when you were last year, which we don't miss one bit.
Yeah.
we were, as someone said tonight, we were early adapters, James. I think that's a little funny play on the word there on Google Hangouts, and we hung into the bitter end. But anyway, we're grateful for Zoom for sure.
Yep.
'Cause it was about a 30-40% chance you were going to get the guest on back in those days.
No, and on Google Hangouts, the higher the IQ of the guest, the lower the chance of them figuring it out. The whole thing made no sense.
That's very true. It's funny in 19 years how things have changed, but this is one of the things that changed for the better. So Roger, you said storms captivated you from a very young age. So talk about that. What drew you in at such a young age?
Well, I think it was divine intervention, to tell you the truth. When I was a baby, in other words, before I really ever had a conscious recollection or deliberate nature to my storm passion or storm obsession, I would crawl to the door to watch lightning, and thunder just thrilled me to no end. The closer, the better. So, needless to say, as soon as I could crawl, I was not following common lightning safety rules and crawling to the screen door and being completely thrilled and captivated and screaming with joy and elation every time we would have a close CG somewhere out front.
Okay, Roger, your parents what did your parents think of that?
Yeah.
Well, it was funny. They didn't understand it, first of all. You know, my dad only had eighth grade education. My mom graduated from high school. I was actually the first in my family to get a college degree of any kind. And but they didn't understand it. You know, my dad would tell me things like, "Oh, I don't know why you want to study them damn things," you know. And
same thing all of our parents said.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
And then my mom, she was just say, "Well, I'm not sure why you want to get out there and see a tornado. That seems really dangerous, but if it'll help you learn about them, I suppose it's okay." You know? So they didn't understand it, but they nurtured it, they cultivated it, and they knew that it was a passion of mine from literally infancy. Now, I don't remember not being just absolutely thrilled and fascinated with the darker and louder the sky, the better I liked it in the daytime, much less at night. So severe thunderstorm, tornado warnings, sirens going off, all that stuff was my peak excitement as a kid, other than going to the library and looking up tornado videos and movies and seeing old articles on tornadoes in the newspaper microfilm from the past, and accumulating note cards. I probably accumulated thousands of note cards on historic tornadoes in U.S. history when I was a kid. So this obsession has been going on for a long time, and it is not died off a bit, even after 35 years of rotating shift work.
Yeah, you could always find me at 551 .5 in the Dewey Decimal System, wherever that was in the library. That's where I was. And look what I have coming here to me. Look at here, guys. What I've got. I have got an amazing dinner coming.
Brother.
Look at
Oh,
this.
brother.
Look at this.
Look at this.
Thank you so much.
You know,
look at
I
this.
have never had the ability to eat and host a show at the same time. I would be burping and farting and all kind of things. It just doesn't work for me. I mean,
There's a show title.
Yeah.
I'll try to mute if that condition develops.
Did you tip her for that, Bill? I mean, she left pretty quick. I mean, at least you didn't do is tip her.
Well, it was my banquet meal, so
Okay.
Troy, you missed the beet soup. I tried to talk James into some beet soup when we got online here.
Nope.
But it was really good. But anyway, so Roger, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Dallas, East Dallas, pretty close to downtown, not too far northeast of downtown. We lived in a series of low rent shotgun shack duplexes northeast of town, and we didn't have a whole lot of money. I mean, these are places that had uneven floors and were roach infested and rat infested, and we didn't have air conditioning. So yes, I was there during the infamous summer of 1980. straight days of 100+ degree temperatures, and we didn't have any air conditioning. And James remembers what that's like there from his time out in that area. And
Oh gosh, that's brutal, just brutal.
it was
Oh,
intense. And the only thing that broke that streak was the cirrus shield from Hurricane Allen, which I was thrilled just to be able
yeah.
to see.
Yep.
So it was, and of course I was into hurricanes too when I was a kid, not just tornadoes and severe storms. And in fact, my dad was a little bit of a tinkerer, and he would find different things and bring them home and mess with them. And one of the things he found once was a reel-to-reel tape deck. And folks who are my age and older, and there are a couple of you on screen there, might remember those. And he recorded me when I was 3 years old. He did an interview of me with my mom, and they asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I didn't hear this tape till I was about 10, and it somehow got lost. But what I said on the interview was, I want to be in a hurricane. That was when I was 3. Well, I got that wish too with Hurricane Andrew.
Yeah.
It was a lifelong passion, and it still is. It hasn't diminished one bit.
So Roger, who were some of the people that you looked up to in the weather enterprise back in your younger days in Dallas, on television, or did your parents take you to the weather service or anything like that?
Well, unfortunately, no. I mean, we didn't have a car. We didn't really have much transportation options except local bus system, and we were close enough to downtown. I could ride my bike downtown, even though my parents strongly discouraged that, but I did it anyway a lot. Most of my weather exposure as a kid came from 551.5 Dewey Decimal System in the Dallas Public Library, or from watching Harold Taft and Troy Dungan and Warren Culbertson on the TV stations there. And of course, you know all about Harold Taft, world's greatest weatherman. He'd been there since 1949. He was an absolute institution. But I watched all those guys. I flipped the channels back and forth every evening religiously at 6:12 to 6:16 p.m., trying to catch as much weather info as possible. Looked at the daily satellite picture in the Dallas Times Herald or Dallas Morning News. And so that was about the most I could do. AM weather, which was on
Oh,
PBS,
yeah.
I watched it, but because I'm a night person and always have been, most of the times that I watched AM weather was during the summers when I stayed up all night and watched it when it came on early in the morning. So the propensity for me to stay up all night and work night shifts was actually pretty easy to grow into when it became an operational forecasting career. But those are my weather influences early, as far as reinforcing this seemingly crazy obsession that I had that I didn't know how many others did. And then when I got to OU, probably my second or third day there, I met Rich Thompson. I said, "Wow, here's somebody who is as crazy about the weather as I am. I've never even met somebody like that before." So we hit it off real fast. Our natural Dallas-Houston rivalry got going, and I still got 5 more Super Bowl wins than he does. So and
so Roger, that's a very inspiring story. It sounds like, your parents must have worked really hard to get you to OU. Talk about that process.
well, they did. They worked hard in terms of encouragement and trying to make sure that I got the best grades I could so I could qualify for scholarships. One of the things I knew early on, from earliest childhood, was that if I was going to get a meteorology degree, they couldn't afford to pay for any of it. I was going to have to qualify for scholarships. I was going to have to qualify for grants and loans. And in order to do that, I had to excel in school. And so I just did the best I could in school all throughout growing up, and earned as many scholarships as I could. And that was really something that I knew would have to be the case from probably age 6 or 7 onward.
Well, it's very, very motivating because I was in the same boat, Roger. I knew my parents did not have the wherewithal to send me to college. And I did a science project that, was on hurricanes. and got a really good scholarship out of the Lynn Heffley the Lynn Henley. Am I saying it right, James? Lynn Heflin Foundation. I can't speak tonight, but anyway, I got that fabulous scholarship, and it changed my life. I wouldn't have had that opportunity without that. But they stressed that from day one. You got to work really hard. You've got to apply yourself in everything you do so that your grades are the very best. So I share that same experience with you. I know what that's like.
Yeah, Bill, it's something that a lot of people, not necessarily can relate to from better means, but we, there was no way that my parents were going to be able to pay for a dime of my college education, and that was just obvious early on. And one of the things I knew that I would need to know how to do is write and write well. So that I just tried to apply myself to that as much as possible throughout my childhood education. Wrote essays as often as possible. Wrote letters to the editor of the Dallas Times Herald and Morning News when I was a kid and a teenager, and not very many of them got published, but a few did. And so I really was strongly self-motivated because I had no plan B. It was all weather. It was going to be tornadoes and hurricanes and severe weather of all kinds or bust. And given what was going on around me with inner city stuff, a lot of kids doing things they shouldn't at that age, drugs, gangs, involvement in criminal enterprises, that there are several avenues that one could take. That was one, and I thought, those avenues they're not going to lead me anywhere. I need to stay focused on basically what I considered the mission. And the mission was to get out of the inner city, get a meteorology degree, and work in a field that I love so that it wasn't really work. And it wasn't easy. I mean, for a kid who went to schools of highly inconsistent quality in the city and had instructors of highly inconsistent quality, it wasn't easy. I mean, when I took the ACT test the first time as a junior, as a senior, one of the questions on that test had to do with compound interest and dividends. I had no clue what that stuff was. I'd never been exposed to those concepts in my life. I'm sure that knocked my ACT score down a notch or two. But, it's just those things you have to overcome. And after I walked out of that test room, I was just mad at myself. I decided, well, not only am I going to be a meteorologist, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life poor. I'm going to learn about those concepts and apply them. And so, ever since then, I've been almost as obsessively parsimonious in a lot of ways, except storm chasing, as in economics, as I am, obsessed with meteorology, so that I don't ever have to live that way again. And so it's been an amazing journey. It really has, and it's far from over.
Yeah. So Roger, have you been able to share those experiences with kids that are in similar situations along the way? That sounds like it would be a really inspiring story.
Well, I have, and rotating shifts hasn't allowed me to do as much of that kind of outreach as I'd like to do. But when I've presented to kids from all backgrounds, I try to relate on their level that kind of position, and say, the position you're in right now, it may not be that great. Maybe there's bad things going on at home or in your neighborhood, or kids are giving you trouble or giving you grief. You gotta just push through a day at a time. Every day, push through, do the best you can each day. And as the days add up, you're going to find that you're doing better and better and better in school, and that you're going to understand the material better. Your grades are going to come up. And at the end of it all, you'll have a much better chance to succeed than you think you will.
Well, we had Hollis Towns, someone James Spann probably knows, the Vice President of Content, Editor-in-Chief at AL.com, which is our newspapers here, in Alabama, the digital footprint of them. And he's working on initiatives that relate to violence, because we have way too much violence, unfortunately. Just random things that happen, shootings in malls and things that are just terrible. And it's, as James Spann says, it's a social problem, and it's really hard to combat. So I think your story is just amazing, Roger. So talk about when you got to OU and what that was like, and how that began to open up horizons for you.
Well, I knew I wanted to go to OU for a long time. Ironically, part of what got me interested didn't have anything to do with meteorology. It was because for some reason I grew up really, okay, Troy, hold your ears shut. I grew up really not liking the UT Longhorns, and exactly, so through all that, and one team that
he'll let you in on a secret, Roger.
Yeah, I'm an Aggie too, Roger. So I was gonna ask if you hung out with Kevin Clazel any when he was up there.
Yeah. I had some great back and forth. But it was all in good fun.
Yeah.
We even played on the same softball team a couple of years, so we had a bunch of fun with that. But when I got to school at OU, that was my aim. I applied to A&M as a backup, just because they did offer in-state scholarships that were pretty good if you were valedictorian or salutatorian in your class.
Yeah.
But my aim was OU first because, believe it or not, because that was the one school Barry Switzer was coach, and they were consistently beating UT in football, which I just loved. So I was an OU fan, football field for a long time. And then I came to find out through a Nova special that was on public TV about the National Severe Storms Lab and about the OU School of Meteorology, and thought, well, this is going to line up great. I'm going to go get to watch amazing football. I'm going to get educated in meteorology, and I'm going to work at the Severe Storms Lab. And I didn't know how I was going to work at the Severe Storms Lab. I just decided that at some point I was going to walk in there and ask for a job. So that's what I did. And they gave me one.
Yeah. And talk about that, because that obviously was a spectacular opportunity and you made the most of it.
Well, it was my freshman year, and adjustment to college was hard. It really was, because K-12 was too easy for me. It came too easy. And so this was really the first time in my life that I'd ever had to learn self-discipline and study skills, and time management was a struggle. Not because I was a procrastinator, but just because I would underestimate how long it would take to do things, since before that, school came so easy. So it was a struggle to do all that, but throughout it all, I mean, my worst grades were my first year of college. After that, things ramped up. But if you just looked at my first year transcript, you would say, yeah, I don't know about this guy. He might not make it. But, and I wasn't used to that kind of thing. It was humbling for sure. But the one thing I wanted to do, regardless, was to be immersed in the science as much as I could and as often as I could, learn as much as I could that was not necessarily academic. And the best way to do that was, I knew that students were employed at the lab. So one day in November of '85, my freshman year, I just strolled in and asked the front desk if I could get a job there. Now, this is not something you can do today and get away with necessarily. But back then, you bet. And I did. And front desk guy sent me up to Roger Brown upstairs, and I talked to him. We set up an interview. They had a vacancy for a federal student position. So I talked to him, Don Burgess, and a couple other folks at the lab. I ended up working for Don for 4 years. And that was some of the greatest times of my life, because I got to learn from top caliber severe storm scientists and catalog and sort out their movie and video and slide collections. So I got to get paid to look at storm slides and movies, and to chase in NSSL vans and with Toto. Now, what kind of a dream thing can that be for a storm obsessed kid? Right away. I mean, I learned how to drive when I was 18, and by the time I was 18 and 3/4, I was driving the Toto truck. So that was just a ton of fun, and it really helped to motivate me to firm up my study skills, get with people in in my meteorology, my peers there in class who seemed to already have better study skills than I did, like Rich and other peers, who were with me at the time. And we had a good study group going that we kept through most of the 4 years that we were in college, and that study group include Rick's boss, Mark Fox, and several others who were there. So we all just studied, we grilled each other, we even through even through poor instructors, good instructors, we kept each other honest, we asked each other questions, we filled in each other's weaknesses and strengths, and in the end I think we all turned out okay.
I would say you did. James A., you had something to throw in there, and then Kim had a very knowing smile. I know she's got something to throw in. James A., what can you add to that?
I was going to say, when I was there, Roger was always in the map room. And I think you learned vocational meteorology, the nuts and bolts of this in the map room, just huddled around that. Was it Alden? Was that radar that would paint on and the Difax maps? And gosh, that was something.
Yeah, when I mean, Rich and I were in the map room pretty much when I met him on day 2, and we were in the map room on day 3, and that continued throughout the rest of our undergrad and early graduate student careers. We went in the map room and we just pretty much took it over for about 4 years. At any given moment, as you might recall, James a lot, you might walk by the map room and hear Rich and I arguing loudly over, the next day's weather situation or some potential chase target or whatever. But yeah, we were in there so often. We studied in there. We studied in the rooms next to the map room. And then when we got tired of studying, we would go in there and just look at weather, even if it was boring. We would look at weather, look at the facts charts, try to figure out what stuff meant, and just soak it all up, soak the experience up. We only got 4 years to be an undergrad unless we were slackers. So let's soak as much as we can.
I remember when we got that Macidas terminal, I never did even see that monitor because you and Rich's head were in front of it all the time.
Yeah, what was ironic is that NSSL had a Macidas display in one of the bottom central rooms of their building there, 1313 Halley Circle at the time. And I got on that and played around with it so much. I really enjoyed that because this was the dawn of the age of live computer displays of weather, fields, satellite imagery, and radar imagery. And what a joy that was to experience, especially for a kid that didn't even know what a computer or email was just a year or two before that. So I just dove right into it, and swam in it and enjoyed it. And this was a large, limitless, warm pool that I could just bask in and soak in all the time. The pool of data, or the zen of forecasting, as Al Mohler might call it. Except I experienced that without even knowing what it was at first until Al explained it to me one day. And this was just a tremendously joyful thing that helped to offset some of the academic stresses of college, trying to keep the grades up, trying to keep up with hours and hours and hours of derivations scribbled down on notebooks. And that was just the tip of the iceberg, because I still really didn't learn enough meteorology holistically until I had Chuck's first advanced forecast techniques course that he ever taught in the fall of '89 as a first semester graduate student there. And that course was by far the best course I ever took at OU in or out of the meteorology department. And I had a lot of great courses outside of meteorology, for sure. But that course was one of the hardest I took, and it was one of the best I took, because it basically forced me to think critically, as opposed to try to just memorize things or to just be as fast as possible with getting equations right. Instead, it forced me to connect the theory with the application, the abstract with the concrete, the left brain with the right brain. And I really didn't have a way to do that. I thought I had, but until Chuck basically figuratively kicked me upside the head in that course and made it happen, that connection was never there. And that benefited me throughout the entire rest of my career, for sure. And I know, Kim, I see you smiling nicely, and there's a reason for that. I watched your WeatherBrains a couple of weeks ago when you were talking about find that kid in the class that's taking notes and has the tape on the notebook, and in your case it was Ariel. Well, Ariel, that he was in the very last advanced forecast techniques course. And so Ariel and I bridged that entire history of that course from front to back. And both of us were tremendously challenged by that. And Chuck knew how to do that, and he did it. And I think Ariel would agree too. He is, and I am, by far better meteorologists for having been exposed to the ability to bridge operations and theory through critical thinking. And that's what that course was. It wasn't so much a meteorology course as a course in how to apply critical thinking to meteorology.
James A., you need to throw what you said in the chat in there.
Roger, you were talking about chasing too, and I know you have aspirations to spend a little bit more time out on the field now that you're away from midnight shifts. Although that's probably a pretty good shift for chasing. But that's what is so cool about chasing, which I don't get to do anymore because they want me at work for whatever reason. But you get to see stuff happening with your eyeballs that maybe you've seen on radar or maybe you've seen in class. And when you make that connection, oh, yeah, that eureka moment. Oh, that's what that is.
James, I learned something new every single time I chase, because whether it's a bust, which fortunately those are happening fewer and fewer as I get older and hopefully know a little more and hopefully go out on fewer days that are busts. But every supercell has something different to present. Every storm offers its own fingerprint in a four-dimensional space-time continuum. It really is, like Al said, the zen of forecasting, where you can conceptually go out, witness this thing that is 60 or 65,000 feet deep, that is far more powerful than you are. You're small and infinitely unimportant in the face of this degree of power. To me, it's almost a spiritual connection that I have when I am out there in beholding a supercell, standing in the inflow of this, listening to the thunder in the vault and in the anvil, and seeing the cloud forms and the processes unfold and move and shift over time, and knowing that every single one of these is different from the other. Every lightning strike is different from the other. Every hailstone is different from the other. And if you approach that in an immersive and appreciative way, it gives you a unique sense of connectedness. And I don't want to sound too overly romantical here, but it gives you a sense of connectedness with a power much, much greater than yourself, at the same time as it offers a sense of, I don't understand why this happened or that happened. Or, wow, I read a paper that just came out about the streamwise vorticity current. Maybe that's what that inflow band on the north side of the mesocyclone is representing right now. Bingo. And those kind of connections can be made between operations, research, and visual conceptualization. And once you make those connections, the light bulb goes off in your head, and you can apply to research, to operations, or to chasing each of the other two to all of their mutual benefit. And it's an amazing experience to be able to do that.
And Troy Kimmel, Roger mentioned two of your favorite words, critical thinking. I know that's been a huge part of your teaching career. Talk about how you get that? Have you been able to get that across to your students over your tenure?
Well, I mean, and I want to go back because one of the things, I mean, I'd only had the chance uh, to meet Chuck a couple of times in passing on meetings up in Norman and things like that. That was the one thing, Roger, you pointed out that I've heard from so many people that if you weren't into critical thinking, not only would Chuck put you in your place, probably kick you on the way out too, because that's something, as I understood it, that he really insisted upon, and so much. I say it on the show all the time. So much of that is missing today's society, unfortunately. The ability to critically think, but you know, my whole talk with classes, Roger, and everybody else when I did it, I'm now retired, um, effective at the end of the fall semester, is I just go in the first day and I'd ask people, ask the students, and you got 200 undergraduates in a room in the intro level class, what are you here for? Let's work around the room. I want to know what you're here for. And what I would end up hearing, guys, is people say, well, I'm here for that degree in business. I'm here for that degree in geography and the environment. I'm here for that. And I would let them go on and do that. And what is your goal? And I would and let them go on for a few minutes. And I'm going to say, well, guess what? I'm going to beg to differ with every one of you that it doesn't matter really. It does matter what your major is, but you can't get there without becoming a critical thinker. That's what the University of Texas is here for. That's what OU is here for. Sometimes our colleges, by the way, fail us. They tell us that they may be that way, but then there are cases that prove they don't necessarily follow through on what they're telling you, what's in the mission statement. But I tell them, once you got that down, go for your business. And I always tell the business students too, I'm going into accounting. I'm saying, good, because I'm moving in with you at some point in the future. When you're making a lot of money, I'm going to move in with you. And I think they got it. I was proud. Well, there would be people coming in saying, no one ever told me that at UT before. No one ever told me about this critical thought thing. And I said, you need to look at the University of Texas mission statement, mentions it specifically. And I got to tell you too, Roger has been so great to me. I've hollered at Roger a few times about maps and charts along the way. And he has been one of the people, if you look at some of the amazing things that are on that SPC website, that he has been behind so much of that. And I'm going to tell you that right now, Roger. I appreciate your friendship. I don't know why you hadn't told me the hell to go away, but so far you're a great friend and someone that's so important to the science and your work you did at SPC and everything else. So.
Well, I appreciate that, Troy. And, it's just like I've told Kevin, too. I'm willing to look past all this UT stuff if you're a great person anyway, and both of y'all are.
Yeah. No, and Kevin's such a great individual, too, and I'm glad for them to be down in Salado now. And they're only an hour from me, and I ain't been out to the ranch yet. So,
hey, you're missing an opportunity. Next time there's storms in the forecast, I hear they've got some good views.
That's what I hear too. So anyway, and now Roger, I don't know if I was supposed to say it or not, but never stopped me before. He's actually working for Baylor University. Mm-hmm. He's doing work for Baylor, and now I don't think he was in Salado for 2 weeks, and he got this phone call and said, "Hey, we want you." So it's going really well. But thank you again, Roger, for being with us tonight, and just thank you for everything you've helped me with and the questions that I've had along the way.
Well, you're very welcome. One of the things that Chuck taught me early on, among a few others, again, the majority of the instructors I had in K-12 and even in college were just not very good. But the ones who were, including Chuck, more than made up for the others because they filled in the gaps, and they really taught me how to think. And I'm not claiming to be anywhere near perfect at it. Nobody is. Yeah. But if I'm going to carry on the legacy of the giants whose shoulders that I stand on in this profession, like Chuck and like Jack Hales and Bob Johns and Weiss and Larry Wilson and all these people who I've worked with, and I'll even say Rich, but don't tell him.
No, we won't tell Rich. No.
if I'm going to carry on the legacy of all these people, and Rich is older than me, albeit not by much. If I'm going to carry on their legacy, I've got to learn from them as much as I can. Al Mohler, all these people who are great mentors of mine early on, and pass that on in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's our conversations that we've had, or a venue like this, or hopefully I'll be able to help Rick out with a few more damage surveys now that I don't have mid shifts and sleep in the way. But what good is however much understanding you have if you can't build it, grow it, and then pass it on.
Amen.
Something about that, just reflecting on that point a little bit, I'm so fascinated by all of the things that modern students have at their disposal. I've often wondered, how much better might I understand the atmosphere if I had gone through undergrad with the myriad of observations that people have at their fingertips? You talked about how seeing just a computer and a real life display of something like satellite data was just so radically transformative to you in your career progression. And at the same time, I almost feel like maybe people take it for granted, so much so. We live in a world that people sometimes doubt it's even real. Um, I'm curious what your view is, what you've witnessed through your career as technologies have improved and our ability to understand physical phenomena that relate. So really connecting that math to the visual, because we have better observations and better capacities. What have been some of the big groundbreaking changes that you've experienced in your career?
Well, Kim, that's an excellent question, and I would expect nothing but an excellent question from you. The the biggest changes really have been in the ability to rapidly assimilate and visually display data that at the start of my career, and I count my undergrad time at NSSL as part of my career because I was getting paid a federal salary to do this stuff, to help out Don with his Doppler radar research, for example, and to chase with the IoT and E crews and Toto and so forth, and to be able to evolve from what we had to do then, which was use the radio if it worked, or stop at a payphone and call back and ask for some data. What is the ob at Childress? Has the wind backed yet at Shamrock? What's going on? Has the outflow boundary passed through Hollis or Altus yet? We had to conceptualize on limited information. And at the time, it was frustrating as hell. In hindsight, it was a great benefit. When I worked at the National Hurricane Center for the first 3 years of my full-time shift working career. And we worked off limited data. We might have one ship or one buoy every 600, 800 miles across the Atlantic. And we had to draw tropical waves. We had to draw the ITCZ. We had to draw dying southern ends of cold fronts based on that and based on satellite imagery. And that was it. And so the ability to work with limited information and conceptualize the flows of the atmosphere from that is something that I fear today that some students may take that for granted, like you were talking about, because observations in so many ways, be it aircraft, satellite, not balloons, and we've actually unfortunately lost wind profilers, but observations in general are more dense than they were in space and in time. And in some ways, most ways, that's great. Data assimilation from models, great. I'm all for that. But in terms of conceptualization and being able to understand the flow of the atmosphere and how things work, it's almost a good exercise, I think, to have students do a little bit of a data denial exercise and say, okay, here are the mandatory level upper air charts, and a 12Z surface chart forecasts what's going to happen today. I think that's an excellent exercise for students. Chuck had us do that. And I think that would still be a great exercise for students today, because it would force them to think beyond model this, model that.
Yeah.
And as Al would say, dive into the data and swim in the data and really get to intimately familiarize oneself with what the language that data speaks, because really the atmosphere is speaking to us through the data, and it's up to us to decode that. And that's the way I've always tried to approach things like data gaps and understand what's going on in between missing areas, because we have to issue forecasts. For example, SPC. When I first got to sales, we had to issue outlooks on limited deadlines, on strict deadlines, often limited information. Even if the computer broke down, the system broke, we didn't get surface observations that hour, the upper air charts didn't plot, and I couldn't analyze them, we still had to issue the same forecast. And those, again, while frustrating at the time, they made me a better meteorologist because they forced me out of my comfort box into a zone of, all right, we don't have upper air charts tonight. I'm going to look at the old upper air charts. I'm going to look at satellite imagery, whatever I can look at to try to formulate a conceptual, foundational time zero model for what the atmosphere is going to do at time 12 and 24 and 36 and so forth.
Roger, you were talking about data availability. 1995, June, Texas Panhandle, the multi-day tornado fest that was out there. Just on Allison Day alone, I racked up a $75 phone bill roaming with the station's bag phone. And now I tell the people this story, and everybody younger than me says, "What's roaming?"
Yeah.
You didn't have an unlimited plan, James?
Yeah, I know. What was that?
Yeah. Well, Roger, one thing that we heard, and especially with modeling, computer modeling, is that ultimately the cautionary note was that could make you lazy as a meteorologist. That you'd have that. I've always been amazed. Bob Johns was a good friend, and I miss Bob every day. But I spent time at National Severe Storm Forecast Center with him, Fred Osby, and those people up there, and then spent some time in Norman as well with the WFO and also SPC. But I still see people coming in with cigar boxes full of color pencils, and that always made me feel so good that people still did that and use some of those maps and charts that Roger, I know, has helped create to put together on the SPC website. I love, looky here,
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's something that I think it's like a precious treasure, that capacity to really dig in that way.
Yep.
And it is it's unifying in our field. Sorry, Troy, didn't mean to cut you off.
James in Tulsa, don't ask what a cigar box is. Okay.
Oh, James.
Yeah.
As I wait for where's the pun? You need to deliver these things as puns, not over that innocent. What is that? So Roger, I have really enjoyed getting to know you. Mostly, I've gotten to know you through things like logical argumentation on social media, but I have always recognized in you a very similar love of taking things to first principles and pulling things out from there. And I have wondered, I think, as you were just describing, I have wondered about the trade-offs between improving technology and what it can show us, and having that lead the development of theory. An example of that is like the Oklahoma mesonet. Once we had that and we had that data, we could look and we could find things like heat bursts. We came to understand what those were because we could observe them in richer detail, more systematically. But it still took a curious mind and a keen eye to cultivate that. And I just hope that with technological advance, we still can maintain curiosity. Can you tell me a little bit about, as the new technologies have marched on and all of that's been incorporated into your practice, you've been at the forefront at SPC in adopting all of these new technologies, techniques. How do you maintain the curiosity? How have you brought all of that in to find the new front of severe weather theory, practice, and that nexus?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that once you get to a place like SPC, the people who apply for and get positions there tend to be what I call, maybe not literally, but in a figurative sense, your valedictorians of the National Weather Service. These are the people who are not just smart. Everybody there is smart. You don't stand out at SPC by being smart. Everybody there is. Everybody there is brilliant. But what you do stand out is and reinforce with each other is the passion for the weather, the passion for severe storms. And that's one thing I think that unites us, that allows us to do well on shift together, is that even when things are difficult, even when there's a lot going on, maybe we're behind a situation, we have to walk in and immediately start throwing out MCDs and watches because things are hitting the fan right at shift change, and it's hard. But we act as more of a cohesive unit that way because we all have that passion. A lot of us, until I retired, have been there a really long time. And, we look at each other not just as colleagues or as scientific peers, but also in a way as family. We talk about each other's families, each other's kids, each other's parents, whatever stage you're in life. We've helped each other through those stages. And so it's not just professional in a lot of ways, it's personal. And it's personal in a good way. The cohesion at SPC is better in the last 10 to 15 years than it has been in any place I've worked at any point in my career, because we've had a large number of us have a lot of experience and have been there a long time. The young folks that come in, and they're highly motivated, they're super smart, they're familiar with a lot of these new technologies, and they want to learn more of the right-brained aspect of meteorology that we've picked up through institutional knowledge over the years. And they want to soak that up like sponges, and they're very open about it. And so we're willing to share that information and understanding with each other. And so it's been a really nice, I don't like to use this word too much because it's bureaucratic, but synergy, really, to I try to avoid bureaucratic speak whenever I can, except when I'm making fun of it, But but really, we which I do often. But really, we have fun on shift. We have comedy time. We do impersonations of other forecasters and of previous forecasters and supervisors and so forth, and we really have fun. It's not just laser focused seriousness at every minute of the night and day. We stay loose and we try to really just enjoy ourselves within the constraints, of course, of making sure that we're first and foremost being excellent and putting out the best product we can put out. And at the end of a shift, if I can walk home and say, regardless of whatever happened today, maybe we did great, maybe we didn't do so great, but we tried and we're going to learn from it. To me, that's a daily source of satisfaction. And then I can look back additively on that over the course of my career and all the things that we contributed. And by we, I mean what Bob Johns called the young pups of cells in the 1990s who are now starting to retire, contributed to the science. And I can look back on that with a really good sense of satisfaction that we did some good. And so no regrets.
Roger, it's been a joy getting to work next door to you all these years. It seems like in the past few years we cross each other as you're leaving from a mid shift and I'm coming in, but always great to know that you were there. And you mentioned a couple of things, that mysterious cigar box full of color pencils that we talked about. I think everybody here knows, but your hand analysis of maps, these are like works of art. I mean, there's a stack of them by the SPC window there when we do tours for people. And I got to believe, well, I know they're hanging in people's offices, homes around the country when chasers come to visit or anything. Just impeccable analysis and just the skill. They truly are works of art. And then I wanted to go back to, you talked about writing and how important writing was. And I think if you've ever read a Roger Edwards discussion, you get that because your discussions, from my earliest memories of reading them up until the last one you ever wrote, I mean, those are also just great. And I don't know if you're doing it intentionally, but what comes through there to me, and you talked about, passing information on to the next generation. I think you're doing teaching as you're doing that. You can learn a lot just from reading your discussions and the other ones. And I know we're going to miss yours because you only had to read like 2 sentences and not look at the bottom of the discussion to see who wrote it, to know it was a Roger Edwards discussion. So I know you're proud of that, but you should be very proud of that. And were you ever thinking, writing those discussions, about kind of being a teaching at the same time you were informing?
A lot of times it sort of came to mind because I've had people over the years send me email, sometimes students, sometimes other meteorologists, and they would ask me a question. They would say, "Hey, I learned something new that I didn't know about from your discussion." And there was a sense of gratification in that because even though I didn't go into writing an outlook thinking, I'm going to teach somebody about isentropic potential vorticity today. Ha ha. That wasn't necessarily my thought process. But if I happened to mention something about that and how it was connected to other processes and someone learned about it, hey, I totally am for that. And I'll tell you a little secret, Rick. and it's not going to be a secret anymore after another 2 minutes. But whenever I wrote Outlook, I had little pretend figures standing on my shoulders watching me do it, in the form of Chuck Doswell, in the form of Al Mohler, Steve Weiss, and Bob Johns, sitting there, and I wrote those outlooks as if I was writing for them, for those who came before me. And if I wrote outlooks in a way that really would help them and would please them, then I think I could convey information in an eloquent yet understandable way to a meteorological audience that was out there already. And so it really was like those guys are standing over my shoulders, not just helping me write the outlooks, but helping me to stay focused. Because when you have a fire hose of information like we do these days, in a lot of respects, the biggest challenge, unlike when I first started in my career, is not to try to interpolate between the gaps, but to try to prioritize and to triage that information into what's important for each day's unique weather challenge. And all those guys were about that. And they foresaw it. They knew about, and you alluded to it, Troy, earlier, Lynn Snellman's meteorological cancer, over dependence on models. They knew that was on the way, and that you had to be able to prioritize and to customize the tools in your toolbox for a given situation, because on a forecast deadline, you didn't have time to use them all. And so when I typed up those discussions, most of the time I started long before I had any confidence in what was going to happen that day. And the act of typing the discussion up really formulated in my head a better understanding of the concept as it went along. So it was almost even though it may not have seemed like it, it was almost an ad hoc exercise. Typing the discussion up allowed me to stitch together these often seemingly incongruent pieces of the puzzle of each day's weather into something that I hope seemed coherent to most of the audience.
Hey, Roger, let's look back on your career and what events are you most proud of that you thought you did a great job alerting everyone down the line and saved lives? And what event comes to mind as what might have been your biggest bust? Because we all have them.
Yep.
Well, there are some that were more background work. For example, this one, Hurricane Andrew. I wasn't involved necessarily directly with the forecasting of it. That was the hurricane specialist. But I did the initial classification on the wave coming off the African coast in Taft B that made it a depression, and handed that to Max Mayfield. And he agreed with everything that I showed him, and he started up advisories on it for what became the most destructive hurricane in Florida history at that time. Now, we had no clue that was going to happen at that time because a lot of things had to come together. But those little things I'm happy about are obscure things. Like, for example, when I was at NHC documenting the first South Atlantic tropical cyclone for a tech memo that they wrote. As it turns out, it wasn't the first ever. You can go back and look in satellite and find examples of others. But that was the first one that anybody really ever noticed and written up. And so really some of those more obscure things that you might not necessarily think of were little highlights of mine. As far as one of the proudest moments in my career, the first high risk that I initiated was for May 4th, 2003. Big outbreak in Missouri, Tennessee, eastern Kansas. And I initiated the high risk for that at 6Z, and it covered the Kansas City area. And several days or maybe a week or so later, a lady emailed me from the Kansas City area and told me that seeing that outlook caused her to alert her mom, who lived in a trailer, to go over to someone's house who was in a safer place. And that trailer was smashed. Okay. The tornado in Kansas City destroyed that trailer. That, to me, really drove home what this was all about. It wasn't about isotropic potential vorticity. It wasn't about conditional symmetric instability. Those are just tools in the toolbox. It was about public service and about safety and about trying to convey the message of being prepared. And Weather Ready Nation makes a great slogan, and I'm all for it. But that is something that I really learned a lot about from Al Mohler, the father of storm spotter training. And that email drove that message home for the first time for me, I think. Even more so than seeing all the terrible things that happened during the May 3rd event. Now, transitioning to there, that's a good segue, because I don't know if that's the biggest bust. I've had some forecasts that I was really unhappy with more than that one. But to only have a slight risk out at 13Z on that day, that was not good. Even though it was a subtle day, even though people have tried to tell me since, oh, well, that was a subtle day, it was hard to forecast, all the shoulder pat stuff, that I was not satisfied with that. And it was a surprise to me, admittedly, to go out and chase that evening and see 11 tornadoes, including 2 violent ones. And so that really drove me hard to do research into that event and to publish formal papers on it and to learn more about how and why we forecasted the way we did and took so long to ramp up. And I'm hoping that those contributions, contributed, or those papers and the research contributed positively to understanding events like that are not necessarily textbook, that are subtle, that are driven by small scale features. I mean, Storm A went up east of the dry line on a horizontal roll. We did discover that. Storm B went up between 2 segments of a dry line. So these things did not behave in classic ways. We were probably a very small temperature or dew point or lift difference between having too many storms and having no storms at all with that event. And unfortunately, for a lot of residents of central Oklahoma, for a tornadic setup, it was about as perfect as you can get. We just didn't know it more than a few hours in advance. And that was a huge motivator to me the rest of my career, to just keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. You don't know everything there is to know. I still don't, never will.
James A., did you want to ask your other question while you had the floor here?
About the
About the radar
AADs.
scanning strategies?
Yeah. Roger, you mentioned Mesonet. Ken brought that up, and you talked about how that changed the granularity, just even in Oklahoma. Now we're seeing mesonets in Kansas and Texas. When the scan strategies started with the 88D, when we're talking the severe weather mode, and now we've gone to ABSET and sales and even more often scan strategies, and it's really opened up the science to not only the concept of being able to successfully warn QLCS tornadoes, but it seems like that has been a pretty big change in, I want to say, the continuum of tornado, that now we are able to look a lot more at these very quick spin up type QLCS tornadoes. I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, I like that you brought that up because part of what got me interested in that was actually something that James Spann did several years ago when some NWS offices were warning on every little inflection or every little cyclonic shear zone that would show up on a line, tor, and you guys had high false alarm and low POD because of that, and or issuing blanket tornado warnings for large stretches of the line because these things are so ephemeral and short-lived. And I think that was actually the biggest bone of contention, was just issuing these blanket tornado warnings for areas that you knew in between those inflections we're never going to see a tornado. And I've always been a scientific idealist, and I know idealism can have its limits, but one of the slogans that I've always used is that I'm not in the business of being dishonest or deceptive with the users of my products. So I don't want a tornado watch or a tornado warning to go out for areas that I know are not going to experience tornadoes. And I tried to apply that concept to watches, but even in the warning sense, I think we can improve that dramatically. I think a paper that Rich wrote that's on the SPC publications page last year that shows that we may actually not have as many QLCS tornadoes as we think we do. That's a really important paper to look at. Not every 1,000-yard wide mesocyclone on the ground in a QLCS is necessarily tornadic. By definition, we may not necessarily be able to establish vertical continuity of the rotation at tornadic strength from ground into cloud by the literal definition of a tornado. But that said, I think it's good that we're a lot more aware of legitimate QLCS tornadoes that went unwarned or got classified as wind damage 20 to 30 years ago. So it's a double-edged sword. We're better at detecting them. We're better at warning for them. But we might be over-detecting and over-warning a bit. Maybe the pendulum should kind of be allowed to balance itself so that we have an optimization of false alarm and of probability of detection. And that's only going to come with more study, more knowledge, and more training. And that's
Is this the same dilemma we faced when the 88Ds first went online with supercell tornadoes?
Oh, James, absolutely. I remember storm chasing in southern Kansas, and I was probably 15 or 20 miles behind this hideously cold outrush of outflow with temperatures in the 50s. And that car thermometer on the meat wagon was a lot more accurate than the meat wagon was attractive as a vehicle. That vehicle, it may have been ugly, but that thermometer worked. And we had temperatures in the 50s and a north wind, and a tornado warning came out for an elevated supercell that was almost on top of me. With this flat, cold cloud base, there was no way this thing was going to produce a tornado. And this also goes to spotter training, if you'll indulge me real quick on this story. And so I just thought, oh, what is happening here? And this is, again, early in the 88D. Okay, so we didn't know as much about elevated convection. And I'm thinking that there's probably whoever issued that warning really was not as familiar with the meso analysis of the event and didn't realize that this thing was elevated over cold air. I drove up to a guy with a bunch of antennas and a pickup. He said he was a storm spotter. And I asked him, what have you been seeing out here? And he says, oh, I've been seeing lots of low hanging stuff, like funnels or hurricanes or something. Funnels or hurricanes or something. Oh,
Wow.
so that taught me a lot of things. We got a lot of work to do in a lot of respects. And again, something I learned from chasing that wasn't necessarily even observing a supercell. We need to improve spotter training. Well, this is back in the mid 90s. We need to improve spotter training a lot. Still, we need to improve our mesoanalytic understanding of the warning forecaster at the radar, which is why I'm so happy to see that we have mesoanalysts in a lot of offices informing warning forecasters now who are at the radar. Hopefully that helps. And the other lesson it taught was really this was, as Al Mohler often taught, an integrated warning system. And if any component or any link in that chain failed, the whole system would fail. And that tornado warning for a clearly elevated storm was a failure. And we can prevent that. And I think over time we've been able to chip away at a lot of these problems holistically. And Kim, with her work with social sciences, in terms of the response to these warnings. I mean, the best forecasts in the world don't do any good if the response is not there. And so folks like Kim have a huge part to play still and will for a long time to come. And so that's, I think that all in all, it's just lessons, one lesson after another. We conquer one, or we think we have, and now we have another one to learn and another one to conquer. But the beauty in this is that the learning never stops. And I'm okay with that.
And Roger, another thing you've been real passionate about is storm chaser responsibility. So talk about that for a minute.
Storm chasers, one thing I've come to realize over time is that there are a variety of valid motivations to be out there. Some chasers just want to go out, look at storms, be left alone, shoot some photos, enjoy nature, go home. Others want to go out there and live stream on YouTube or whatever. I don't have a problem with any of that as long as it's done in a safe or responsible manner. And so I'll always be an advocate for safety out there. I know it's a little bit of an oxymoron. A thunderstorm is not the safest place to hang out. I realize this. Any chaser, me included, could get in a wreck, could get killed by lightning, whatever happens. It's a risk. It really is. It's a risk that we're willing to take because of our passion for the storms. But I think we minimize the risk. We can't eliminate it, but we minimize the risk by practicing and encouraging safe driving habits, for one. None of this passing uphill on a wet road garbage. By encouraging safe habits in terms of pulling out into the road, respecting and understanding storm behavior so that you don't get caught by surprise by what a storm does. I think that's where meteorological understanding comes in, even if you don't have a formal education. Don't depend on the radar because it may be 5 or 10 minutes old or older. In the heat of battle, you don't know how old that image is necessarily that's arriving. Over dependence on information that may or may not be timely is a problem. And I think just a little more courtesy and responsibility. The golden rule could go a long way out there in the field in helping us all to observe storms safely. And part of that to me is reporting what we see to the extent that the technology allows us to back to the WFOs. I try to do that when I'm stopped, not when I'm driving. I'm not going to tweet a tornado picture while I'm driving. But if I'm stopped, there's a tornado, I'm absolutely going to take a picture of that and tweet it back to Rick's office if it's in the Norman area, even if it means I take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 fewer DSLR photos of that tornado, because that's information that I know they're going to want to have, like with the cold tornado last year. And I didn't know that was going through that town and killing people. I didn't know Spencer in 1998 was going through the town and killing people. It bugged me in 1998 that at the time, we didn't have cell phones in the cars. My chase partner was a licensed ham radio operator, but he couldn't get through to anybody. We saw a big tornado that was headed in the general direction of this little dot on the map called Spencer, but we didn't know it was there because the tornado had cut off power to the town, and so there were no power flashes with it. The next day, we didn't find out that, we know that became South Dakota's deadliest tornado until the next day when we went out there to do the survey, and we talked to people whose relatives had gotten killed in that. Again, drives the point home. And so I think it's valuable for all meteorologists to see that side of the picture as well. Not just, and of course, we know that Rick does because he's going out surveying tornadoes damage all the time. But I think it's a very valuable thing to do to accompany those who have to do it and to really learn about that side of things. So I've wandered from what we were talking about to begin with, but from the chaser perspective, I would just say keep a sense of perspective. Everyone out there is not more important than anyone else. Let's try to apply the golden rule to each other. Let's give each other room. Let's give each other space. Let's let them in front of us when there's kind of a conga line going on. And let's try to keep a safe distance from nasty, ugly mesocyclones and not get caught up in this merry-go-round of craziness that can happen in there and processes that you may not necessarily be familiar with or seen before. Because even the most experienced, knowledgeable, hardcore chasers can get caught up in something unexpected and pay a price. And my friend Tim Samaras did. And I don't want that to happen anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly true, Roger. Of course, government cutbacks are making the news big time right now. Do you fear that reduced funding could impact severe weather forecasting and research and put a lot of the public safety initiatives that we've done at NOAA and the SPC in danger?
Yeah, and this is not something that's new, unfortunately. I mean, it's making the headlines now because we're seeing sort of a shock and awe manifestation of it, so to speak. But Weather Service forecast offices and to some extent SPC and national centers have been short-staffed for the better part of 15 years. Budget after budget after budget, the president's budgets, so to speak. You read those lines in the president's budgets from NOAA ever since around 2010 or a little before or after. And what do they say? They say NOAA requests. And then when you read what NOAA requests in the president's budget, Democrat, Republican president, Democrat, Republican Congress, it hasn't mattered. NOAA requests, and it's some kind of draconian cut. And you see it time after time after time. And fortunately, Congress has come in. Congress has been friendlier to us than the president's budgets have. And Kim has seen these things. Congress comes in and says, look, we're not going to do this. We're not going to enact these draconian cutbacks in staffing and funding that NOAA requests. We're going to be friendlier. But nonetheless, despite that, there have been vacancies, unrelenting vacancies for 10 or 15 years. So this thing that's going on right now, I don't favor it. I don't like the approach of hitting something with a sledgehammer when a surgical scalpel will do. Every agency has its areas of redundancy and waste and things that could be managed better. And that even includes a very lean, bare bones agency like the Weather Service. But one thing that you cannot and must not do is apply a sledgehammer to the frontline forecasting operations and the frontline electronics technology, which, by the way, is very outdated and primitive in the Weather Service, in order to fulfill some kind of higher mandate, because you are going to suffer for it. And you're going to add to the problems we've already had over the last 10 to 15 years with chronic vacancies. And not just that, but with overtime and burnout and staffing shortages, which are going to become a worse problem because of things like the fork in the road and some of these other things that are going on. We already have people across MICs who are leaving because of the fork in the road. We have experienced forecasters. We're losing institutional knowledge because of people who are retiring, whether like me voluntarily at the end of the year or through the fork in the road or whatever else is offered. I don't blame them for doing it. I'm not mad at them for it. I probably would take that offer too if I'd hung around another month and a half. But it concerns me greatly that we're not only losing money, but that we're losing institutional understanding. And it's a cumulative thing. It's not just the last 2 months.
I'll just add a bit to that. I'm glad that you opened the conversation, Bill, and Roger. Your thoughts are really interesting, especially in light of all the history. Um, it is interesting to think about how the budget has been a bit of a toy that's gone around, around and around. um, Unfortunately, something that happens sometimes with the president budgets is they zero out or greatly reduce things that are really popular. And then they basically are playing a game with Congress to say, well, I only proposed a budget that's this amount, but they took out all of Congress's favorite things. So then Congress has to come back and keep adding and adding. And it's this continual process that has, at its basis, Roger, you said earlier, you really enjoy economics, and I do too. And when you look at the game theory of it, at each one of these instances, everyone is doing what is most rational to play the game. But what's happened over time is we have grown and grown and grown in ways that are in some ways unchecked. I think that we're unfortunately reaping the collective action fail, of all of that gaming. And it's really, really sad to watch how that's playing out in meteorology. You mentioned the loss of the institutional knowledge. It's happening at every level. We're losing some leaders in field offices. We're losing some very critical leaders also in headquarters. I don't know who all is publicly known and disclosed as yet, but by the end of the week, people will know. But it's it's going to be a monumental shift. So I wonder, Roger, you've been there for a lot of discussions about the Weather Service and what it should look like over the years. There have been conversations, you're right. This isn't the first time that even, cuts have been proposed for the Weather Service, even just by Congress. I mean, 10 years ago, they passed a first iteration of a Weather Act that consolidated the Weather Service into 6 regions. This has been toyed with for a long time. What's your hope for the Weather Service in the face of this? What if we're successful in weathering this loss of some institutional knowledge and a really challenging time before us? What should we take as our hope for where we'll land in the end?
Well, I've been trying to encourage some of my peers that this too shall pass. It may not pass pleasantly for some. I personally know several people who would be terribly affected if both personally and professionally, if for example the idea if for example Weather Service leadership and NOAA leadership is unable to gain an exemption for meteorologists like the Forest Service did for theirs, and those entry level people who are quote unquote probationary are let go, because those are some of our brightest young minds, and they're the ones that are going to bring the freshest ideas and the best technological familiarity in. But I will say that as overall, I don't think things are ever as rosy as they look or as awful as they look when you try to step out of the situation, as I sort of have, and look at the big picture. And I think that as the ebb and flow of political whims change, one thing that will remain constant is that the National Weather Service is consistently among the highest rated governmental entities, regardless of anybody's political affiliation. Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Independent, doesn't matter. a lot of respect is there in Congress and in educated and informed citizenry for the Weather Service. And so that to me gives optimism in the longer run that, yeah, we may have to weather some really ugly stuff. And we have in a way for the last 15 years in terms of vacancies not being filled. But that in the longer run, we're going to weather this, so to speak, better than a lot of other entities can. I mean, I'm a small government guy myself, but one of the things I think the best roles that government has is protection of life and property of the citizenry and to further the advancement of those functions that are constitutionally justifiable as government functions. And you cannot do that without excellent weather forecasts. The government cannot operate efficiently without excellent weather forecasts. We can't, for example, constitutionally effectively regulate and monitor air traffic and interstate commerce and international commerce without excellent weather forecasts. It's constitutionally justifiable in every way, shape, and form. And that's one of the reasons that even someone like me, who is more of a traditional fiscal conservative libertarian type, has joined the Weather Service, because this is one of the places in government where the service is noble, the service is public, the service saves lives, and the service saves a lot of economic loss. And I felt over my career that that is a very noble calling. There's really no higher calling than public service. And that's why I went into it. And I'm proud to have done that.
All right, Roger, I think James A. and I want to line up with a couple of silly questions before James Fan steps in and asks the hard questions.
All right.
My silly question is, you collect rocks from all the cool places you go. What's the most unique or, meaningful specimen that you've ever collected?
Wow, that's an excellent question, because I've collected some weird rocks from different places. And I will say, Bill, I don't just take, I try to give. So every place I go, I bring with me a little bag of rocks from my property, red Permian sandstone and shale from my property here in Oklahoma, and I leave it there. So maybe some geologists at various road cuts in Washington State or Italy or Thailand or wherever I've been will be a little bit confused because they'll find a red stone from Oklahoma and they won't know where it's at. But I think some of my favorite rocks that I've ever found have been around the northern area of Lake Superior, where the rift zone there transitions to the Canadian Shield. And so you have a bunch of ancient volcanic rocks and mineralized volcanic rocks that have amethyst in them. And going up there and finding some of that was really a treat for me, and the variety of different stones and formations and some of that ancient rock up there. But really, it's fascinating to see it everywhere I go, because all that geology is a very, 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 very slow motion fluid flow. We deal with faster motion fluid flows in meteorology, and the geologic time scale just knock off a few orders of magnitude, and it's not really all that different.
James,
Hey, Roger,
you go, and then Rick.
All right.
Has something to
boy.
bring the house down.
Oh boy. Synoptic Lab, OU. Did you ever think any of us would make it?
I tell you what, James, I must have looked at you and just went, "Oh no!"
You and everybody else.
No, that was a really good class, because we had folks who were there at school in a more traditional way like you. We had Air Force students who were there who were trying to get a master's degree in meteorology. It was a really interesting mix and fun to teach. And really, it taught me a lot, because one of the best ways to learn a subject matter is to teach it. And even though I'd already by that point had Chuck's class, or it was concurrent in the case of, I think, the one that you were in, to be able to teach a course, well, I definitely better go through that material and make sure that I understand it, or I'm going to be a fool trying to stand up there and teach it. So it was really a great benefit to me, maybe even more than you, because you were just having to sit up there and listen to me bloviate or, crack a whip at a Dr. Pepper can or whatever it was that I was doing while throwing equations up on the board. But if I couldn't explain those equations and explain what they meant in terms of real world weather, then why was I even there? And so yeah, I had formed some good friendships just from the students in that course. You and several others.
Roger, I know you're going to enjoy retirement. You probably already are. And I'm envious, the more I see people I've worked with retiring, it's like, well, it's not far down the road. For those of us who don't understand what retirement's like, could you give us like 5 bullets, 5 things you did last week? I'm just curious. Okay, I'm out.
Well, you know what? I told Bill Bunting, who was our branch chief at the time, and then Rich became that just a few months before the end of my time at SPC. But I told both of those guys, I'm not going to coast into retirement. I'm going to crash into it. So I was writing conference papers right up till the end. Did some research for the Severe Storms Conference out there in Virginia Beach. Had a ton of fun doing that. Published a formal paper with Rich earlier in the year about a chase that was directly the result of a chase we went on near Kingfisher on May 29th of 2012. You probably remember that storm, Rick. And as a result, I just keep it going. I'm not retired from the science. Far from it. I'm retired from rotating shift work. That's it. And so in the last week, if I had to make a 5-point bullet, I could do it in about that many seconds because I still stayed involved, emailing people that I'm helping out with science projects at OU and at Sims and elsewhere, and talking to you guys here and helping out with another research paper that I've been soliciting reviewers for EJSSM, which is actually a comment on a paper in another journal. So that's interesting. And getting reviews back for that, and then soliciting reviewers for another paper that just came in. So, scientific involvement. I don't want to atrophy. If I stall, I atrophy. So I don't want to atrophy. I want to stay involved in the science. I want to help out with damage surveys. I want to help out with field projects. Hopefully some of the funding for those won't just totally disappear. So it's not just personal chasing, which is still going to happen a lot too. I'll be involved in some forensic meteorology work as well with Tim Coleman over there, and a couple of y'all know Tim. And so it's going to be a blast. I'm going to have fun in retirement, but it's going to be on a friendlier schedule. That's really the only difference.
Well, let's just get real though, Roger. Why did you retire? You're just a kid. What's the deal?
James, not everybody has the fortitude that you do, and I admire it. You're locked into something great there, and I really do hope that you, just like so many of us have, maintain that passion and maintain that sense of service and never lose it. And that as long as you are able and willing, that you're able to serve those folks in Alabama with the great work that you do. And so retirement is something that for me was more driven by a sense of 35 years of rotating shift work is enough. I don't have any health problems yet, no metabolic disorders, no heart trouble, but that is a problem. Shift work is a known carcinogen. Rotating shift work, although it hasn't been studied to the extent that straight shift work has, must be even more of a carcinogen than just straight shift work. Yeah. I don't want any of that stuff. So that was another driver. I want to be able to contribute in ways that don't necessarily shorten my lifespan artificially. None of us are guaranteed another day, hour, week, month, or year. I look at what happened to Al Mohler. he wanted to retire and travel all over the West and do photography and contribute to science just in ways that didn't have to do with shift work, kind of like me. And he didn't get that chance. It was cut short because he had early onset Alzheimer's disease, and that took his life, and that rendered him incoherent within just a few years after he retired. One of the most brilliant minds I've ever known was ravaged by that awful disease. And I'm not saying that could happen to me, but I'm not going to sit here and say it can't. So my motivation was to kind of just switch gears a little bit and try to last longer, try to get a little healthier. I could certainly stand to shed a few pounds. I think being retired will help with that too, because I can get more into more of a routine of going outside and getting exercise and doing some work. But that's really what retirement is about for me, is more of a sense of freedom and not being locked into something that's really not healthy to do for as long as I did it, but I got away with it. I don't know how much longer I can get away with it. So it's time to transition. And no, I am never getting rid of my Dallas Cowboys merch.
So one more. We have to take a break, but one more question. So A-Lot asked you about your best outlook, your worst outlook. I want to know, out of all those years you worked at SPC, the one most memorable shift, that one shift that you'll never forget for whatever reason, which one was it?
Wow, that is an amazing question, because I had several unforgettable shifts. It's hard to imagine one that stands out, because there were a lot that were really busy, and those super busy shifts during outbreaks or during just a lot of severe weather happening in different parts of the country. Excuse me, they almost became a blur. Not a blur in a sense of I didn't know what was happening or that I was suffering from amnesia or something like that, but that we're going so fast and we're crunching through everything so quickly and so efficiently that it didn't even seem like the shift lasted as long as it did. The shift is over and I'm exhausted mentally, but wow, it seems like I just got here. It was 2 hours ago. It was actually 8. And I'm sure you've experienced stuff like that, James. When you've had a conga line of supercells move across Alabama, and you're really getting into it. By the time it's over, you almost want to slump over because you've really been hammering away at it for so long.
No, and I know exactly what you mean, because people ask me the same thing. What's the most memorable moment on that big green wall? Well, we miss it. We miss the history of these big events because we're so busy. It's almost like it passed us by. And I look back on April 27th, 2011. I just don't have many memories of that because I was so busy. And you understand what that's like. And so it is a very hard question. But having said that, here, it's, for goodness, it is 40 minutes after the hour. So we must stop and hear from Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We've got Jen. And this week in tornado history, we're going to come back and hear from Bruce Jones, and we are going to do picks of the week, Roger. So if you can, stick in here, hang in here with us. We'll do picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
As we wrap up February 2025, the planets are still putting on a show in the evening sky. All the planets in the solar system are above the horizon after sunset. You probably noticed Venus first, shining brightly in the southeast, then Jupiter a bit dimmer, high in the south, nearly overhead, then Mars in the southeast. If your western horizon's clear enough, you might just catch Mercury and Saturn. They're separated by about 1.5 degrees right now. They'll likely be just above the horizon by the time the sky dims enough to make them out. Mercury will be the brighter of the two, just to the right of Saturn. Uranus and Neptune, they're up there as well, but you'll need a telescope to see them. Looking ahead, there will be a total lunar eclipse on March 14th, Pi Day. Unlike solar eclipses, there's no path to worry about here. If you can see the moon, you can see the lunar eclipse. Everyone in the lower 48 states, Canada, and Mexico will be able to experience this one. The show starts just a few minutes after 1 a.m. Eastern Time, midnight Central, and so on, as the partial eclipse begins. The full eclipse begins just before 2:30 a.m. Eastern and lasts a little more than an hour. The moon will be at its deepest in the Earth's shadow by 3 a.m. The show ends at 4:48 a.m. Eastern as the partial eclipse ends. There's also a little more than an hour on each side of those times that I just gave you when the moon is passing through the Earth's penumbra, the lighter part of Earth's shadow. This is mostly of interest to eclipse researchers and something you're not really going to notice if you go outside and look. Then on March 29th, Eastern Canada and the northeastern US will see a partial solar eclipse at sunrise. Anyone south and west of a line extending from about Toronto to North Carolina's Outer Banks, sorry, no eclipse for you. Best views will be in northern Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, 21 tornadoes occurred on February 24th, 2001. Most of these were in the state of Arkansas. One of the strongest, though, with the longest path that moved 52 miles, was in the state of Mississippi. This F3 began in rural Calhoun County with limited damage initially. The twister moved to the northeast, moving into Pontotoc County near the Matthews area. Most of the damage was between the communities of Algoma and Pontotoc. Approximately 360 homes, 15 businesses, and 2 churches were damaged or destroyed. For the storm data publication, one of the destroyed houses was a restored antebellum plantation home listed in the National Register of Historic Places. In Lee County, 8 homes and 1 business were heavily damaged in the Guntown area. In Baldwin, along the Lee-Princess County line, nearly 100 homes were damaged or destroyed, and the Baldwin High School lost the roof to its gym. Tragically, there were 6 fatalities, all in the Pontotoc area along 10th Street. March 1st, 2007. At 12:47 p.m. Central Standard Time, a tornado warning was issued for Coffee County, Alabama. This included the city of Enterprise. At approximately 1:05, the tornado was documented on the ground at the Enterprise Municipal Airport. Minor damage to homes occurred, and 4 chicken houses were destroyed. 5 minutes later, the tornado hit Enterprise High School. 8 students were killed when a concrete wall fell on top of them as they huddled in a hallway in a crouched position. 50 people were injured. The football stadium was destroyed, and vehicles surrounding the school were overturned. A 9th fatality occurred in downtown Enterprise. 83-year-old retired nurse's aide Edna Hayes Strickland was killed. She was standing behind a living room window of her home as the glass shattered. A total of 239 homes were destroyed. 374 had major damage.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
And James, I have some exciting news to share about one of our own in the weather community and one of our legendary WeatherBrains panelists. The EMAT Awards Committee has announced that Troy Kimmel has been selected to receive the 2024 EMAT Lifetime Achievement Award at their coming up Leadership Symposium, which will be held March 16th through the 19th in College Station. It's going to be presented during their awards luncheon on Monday, March 17th, which has an important significance to this group from 11:30 till 1 p.m. At the Hilton there in College Station. It's an amazing recognition of Troy's incredible contributions to emergency management and the weather enterprise in Texas. Troy, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was notified of this about a week ago, and Bill and I talked. They said, well, we need you to be there Monday at noon on the 17th. And I said, well, you don't know how much of an honor it is, but I'm going to be with my colleagues at WeatherBrains in Huntsville, Alabama that day or on the way up there. So very proud of it. But, you know, I say this, and Roger and Rick especially, and folks, everybody knows this, that on the emergency management side of the house, it's always a team effort. It's not one person. It's always the people that come together as a team and make things happen and hopefully keep people safe. And so if when I am not there to accept that award on that Monday, I'm going to tell those folks via video that I'm accepting on behalf of everyone, because it just is, it's a team effort in emergency management. But this Emergency Management Association of Texas, I so much appreciate it.
That's amazing. And you just gave me a little chill up and down my spine there, Troy. That is amazing. We would understand completely if you were going to be there to receive that award, but that means a lot to us that you would she used to be with us on that important night in Huntsville. So thank you for that, Troy.
Yeah, thank you for the mention.
And speaking of important contributions to weather safety, one of the most critical tools for severe weather warnings is NOAA Weather Radio, a life-saving resource that doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And tonight, as always, this time of the week, in the late winter and early spring, we have Bruce Jones from Midland Radio with us to talk about the role of NOAA Weather Radio and emergency communication, and why every home and business should have one, and how we can better promote this essential service. Bruce, so great to have you here on an important night for us when we're celebrating Troy's award and our friendship with Roger and just his incredible career with NOAA.
Well, and I'll tell you, for you two great Texans, the two newest NOAA transmitters are on the air up in Dalhart, Texas, and in Spencer, Texas, up there in the Panhandle. Um, National Weather Service Amarillo really worked well with the Southern region to get those up there. There was a hole in coverage up around Dalhart, and yeah, that's active weather zone up there. And for some reason, they never had a NOAA weather radio transmitter, but they've got two of them up there now. So congratulations to the state of Texas. Thanks to Southern Region headquarters, and thanks to everyone at National Weather Service Amarillo for getting that project going and up. And those two transmitters are on the air.
Well, we're about 18 months away from our 50th anniversary of having NOAA Weather Radio in Birmingham. November of 1976, it went online. Still a red letter date. And in my early weather days, we had a lot of fun earlier, Bruce, talking with Roger about his young days, a very inspiring story. He and I shared a lot of the same characteristics. But when that NOAA Weather Radio came to town, it was a game changer.
I remember being on the air in the 1970s and telling my listeners, now you can buy these gizmos at Radio Shack, but if you buy one, hold on to your sales slip, because there's not good coverage in all areas of the state of Missouri. So we still had a lot of holes in the state of Missouri back then in the late 70s. And I had to caution people that, you can buy one at Radio Shack, but when you take it home and plug it in, you might not be able to pick up a signal. But now we have 1,036 transmitters nationwide. All 50 states, 5 U.S. territories are covered with NOAA Weather Radio. So it's really imperative that people buy these little gizmos so they can pick up the signal. I mean, the signal's just flying through the air right now, but unless you have a receiver, you'll never hear it. It'll never save your life. So this time of year, especially as we get moving into tornado season, please remind all your friends to have multiple redundant ways to get these warnings. Cell phones are great. Outdoor sirens are great when you're outdoors, but for corn's sake, every home, school, and business in America should have the voice of the National Weather Service, NOAA Weather Radio, right there, because the broadcast is free. We do have a special offer for those of you who are WeatherBrains enthusiasts. There's a promo code that you can use to get 25% off when you purchase a weather radio product. The promo code is SPAN25. That's SPANN25. And that gets you 25% off your weather radio order at midlandusa.com. These radios make a great gift for Father's Day, for Mother's Day, for birthdays, any time of the year. They're wonderful gifts, and every home should have one. I wouldn't think of living in a home without a smoke detector in it. Why would I live in a home without a storm detector? They operate by themselves. You plug them in, you kind of forget about them. You can set them to just go off for your county. That white one there has specific area messaging coding so that you can tell it, I only want to hear warnings from my county. And now with partial county alerting, there are several counties in the United States of America that are even becoming more finely partitioned into smaller segments so that the weather warnings can be more finely focused. So a NOAA Weather Radio should be in every home, every school, every business in America. And with the promo code SPAN25, SPANN25 at midlandusa.com, you'll get 25% off your weather radio purchase. It's a WeatherBrains special just for you.
And we know a lot of our listeners, Bruce, that listen to this show, they're weather dweebs. They probably have one. But what you can do, tell everybody in your family that doesn't have one about this, the neighbors that you have near you about this, because we're about to get into the heat of the season here. I mean, March is going to be here next week, and so this is a marvelous time to do this. And getting the warning, it's step number one. It's the most critical step. You can't take cover unless you get a warning. And to get the warning, it's not a siren, and they serve a purpose, but the primary method, the baseline, it's that, a NOAA weather radio. So get that done. Please. All right. Let's do picks of the week here. Let's go to James Adelot because he's got to be on the 9 o'clock news in a few moments. So, James A., what you got?
Well, mine is the video clip of me falling on my backside on my own icy driveway in front of my camera, exceptionally well framed. And it is, thankfully, the only thing wounded was my pride. But my goodness, it's kind of embarrassing. I fell like just a sack of potatoes.
It's outstanding. That's a great video. I've watched it 5 times. It gets better every time. So that is
no, it doesn't.
Great. All right, Rick Smith, give us a good pick of the week.
Well, I get to participate in something cool this week. The AMS has something called Jamposium, which is a 2-day online kind of thing where they have guest speakers. Kevin Claysel's going to be one of them this year. And I think Thursday afternoon, I get to speak about what it's like behind the scenes at a weather service office during tornadoes or during a severe weather event. So I'm excited about that. May throw a little bit of Twister stuff in there too, but that's coming up. I don't have the time, but the link will be in the show notes, and you can go to that, and it's free. Anybody can join if you want to join for all or part of it. And there's some really good information that'll be shared there. So that's mine.
Excellent. Of course, all the picks will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. By the way, my pick, I don't know if you saw it, NASA has determined today that asteroid 2024 YR4 now poses no significant threat to Earth in 2032. So Bruce Willis and his team will not have to come in and be launched up to the asteroid and blow that thing up before it hits the Earth. So we now do not. That's one less thing we have to worry about. So I'll put it that way. All right, Troy, give us a good pick.
Have to give credit to our WeatherBrains listener viewer, Harvey Day, who is always in touch with us via email at weatherbrains.com. And really kind of cool. I like seeing innovative things maybe that other people are not doing. But WFO at San Juan has put together, they're still calling the experimental beach forecast webpage. And if you have a chance to see it, it's kind of cool. It primarily does with rip currents. I think that's their topic tonight. But they also do things like waterspout, thunderstorm chances, heat index, things like this. Of course, heat index to San Juan. I mean, but you know what I'm saying. I think it's kind of a cool page. And thanks, Harvey, for the idea for my pick of the week.
Excellent. Okay, Kim, give us a good pick of the week.
All right. My pick of the week relates to the wonderful joke that Rick made earlier about asking Roger his 5 things. This has been the most recent example of just what's going on with our federal colleagues in the weather space. There's an article that just went out that discusses how today OPM gave us guidance that, this is not on OPM to decide. This is something, listen to your own agency and ultimately your own management about how to respond to this if you are going to. I think I offer this as a pick of the week to give everybody an encouragement. I think right now it's really useful with anything that happens to take a step back and take several deep breaths. And I am as guilty as anybody of this. I started out, on this path a couple of weeks ago when we knew we were in a different time, with that very much in mind and very much in focus. And it didn't take long for me to fall off of my own train. But every single time, it seems that initial instinct is affirmed, that it's worth giving things some time. So as much as you can, try to collect that courage, take a deep breath, and remember what Roger was saying is true. We are such a vital part of our country and so well supported, and your work is so valued. So just take that time
Great idea and suggestion. Thank you, Kim. All right, Bruce Jones, give us a good pick.
You know, growing up, when Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese would do the play-by-play for baseball, they'd always talk to the young boys out there. Now, you kids, you watch this very carefully here. Don't do this or do it this way. So, for you kids who want to be like Roger Edwards and draw these beautiful maps with all these wonderful colors, make sure you purchase Color Race erasable colored pencils. They have to be erasable, or your life will be a real mess, just as your maps.
There you go. That's a great bit of advice. So let's just morph right into Roger. Roger, I know you got something special for us, so give us a good pick of the week.
I'll give you a pick of the week that I'll go way back in the Wayback Vault to Al Mohler. If you go to YouTube and you look up a video called Zen and Forecasting, and it has nothing to do with Zen Buddhism or anything like that. It's more the mindset of immersive, holistic, left brain, right brain attention to detail, where the forecast comes together from a complete view, objective and subjective. And as Al says in the video, it almost becomes spiritual when you really get on a roll with a forecast. And Al can explain it so much better than I can. So go to YouTube, the College of DuPage. It's on their YouTube channel. They did an interview with Al back in the late 90s. I think Paul Cervatka did the interview. I'll see him here in a couple of weeks up in Chicago for their Fiesta at Fermilab. And Cervatka did the interview of Al Mohler, but it's called Zen and Forecasting. And that is an absolutely beautifully eloquent speech and an interview of Al Mohler, one of my early mentors. And so many of those concepts still apply to forecasting today in a baseline sense. So I really encourage everyone to go take a look at that. Zen and Forecasting with Al Mohler.
Great. And we'll put it up on weatherbrains.com. I will never forget, Roger, going to the AMS chapter meetings, and they were typically in Arlington. This is back in the mid 80s. And hearing, if I saw that Al was speaking, I was going to be there. I mean, when he opened his mouth, everything he said, there was benefit to everybody in that room, and he was really a special person. So I can't, and I've not seen that video, so I can't wait to watch that. So thank you, Roger. All right, Bill Murray, go give us a good pick.
Yeah, James, I'm going to take the foghorn just because nobody else did, just to hear the dulcet tones of the foghorn before we get into the upcoming guests here. Big thanks to Roger Edwards tonight. And so sorry that the chance guests that we talked about having couldn't be on because Fox Weather wouldn't let him, Roger. They don't like us for some reason over at Fox Weather. I don't understand what that is, but we can't break through. So anyway, but we're really grateful that you were here tonight. Next week, we have Pete Wolf. He's going to be talking about his radar short course. Alabama weather legend Rich Thomas will join us for show 999, and then show 1000 is just around the corner now. And we have an exciting show lined up. Many thanks to our friends at Barron in Huntsville, because Bob and his team are jetting all of the WeatherBrains panelists there for this show and giving us their conference room for the night. And Cherie Smiley is preparing an Irish dinner buffet in honor of St. Patty's Day. So Troy Kimmel, we will have bangers and mash. Yeah. I don't know if it'll make up for your rubber chicken you would have had at the Hilton College Station that day, yeah. But I think it'll be pretty darn good. So a lot of fun things, a lot of surprises, and just amazing that we've gotten to this point. Our metronome, James Spann, is the reason, of course, and we'll even have a few surprises for him that he won't even know about that night. Oh, so James, you better come ready that night. You better be ready to duck and weave, because it's gonna be fun. Show 2000 will be on Monday, May the 16th, 2044. So mark it on your calendars. Show 2000. I think we're gonna get there.
Well, why not? Let's keep going. Hey, Roger, anything you want to promote? Any social media accounts? People want to follow you? What do they do?
Well, I'm on the only public social media account I got right now is on X, Twitter. I'm not a multitasker really. I have trouble keeping up with too many of these things. So I've still got my X account, Sky Picks Weather. You can look it up there. Um, I've got photo gallery online with it's grown to over 2,000 pages of photographs and explanations of weather and water phenomena at skypix.photography, SKYPIX dot photography. And I try to make it as educational as possible. Every photo page has an explanation, and there's sections on wall clouds, tornadoes, daytime lightning, nighttime lightning, and waterscapes, landscapes. Enjoy it and just have fun.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks, Roger, for your time. You've given us a couple of hours, and thanks for your service to the Weather Enterprise. And it's not going to stop. You're just changing roles. So these are exciting times. And if you're new here, Weather Brains is typically on the air every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. And you can watch it live. The video version, it's on YouTube, youtube.com/weatherbrains. But we know that most of you listen the podcast version. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. Jen was not able to be with us this week. She should be back next week. We'll do a longer email segment. But we always love to hear from our listeners. So on behalf of the entire Weather Brains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
Thank you,
Great
everybody.
show.
Thanks, Roger.
This was
Thank
a
you,
good one.
Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Roger.
Outstanding
Thanks so
show.
Buddy, it's great to see all of y'all again. And James, good luck with the season coming up. I don't have any scientific basis yet, but I have a funny feeling that your activity is about to ramp up a lot, as is Rick.
Yeah, it was too